The Honorable Mr. Anand Sharma, the Commerce, Industry and Textile Minister of India. His Excellency Dr. Guy Scott, Vice President, Republic of Zambia. His Excellency Mr. Philemon Yang, Prime Minister of the Republic of Cameroon. His Excellency Mr. Joseph Boakai, the Vice President of Liberia. His Excellency Gervais Raffieri, the Second Vice President of the Republic of Burundi. His Excellency Mr. Daniel Kablan-Duncan, the Prime Minister of Cote d'Ivoire. His Excellency Mr. Rui Duarte Barros, the Prime Minister of Guinea-Bissau. We are yet to be joined by His Excellency Sekandi, the Vice President of Uganda, is supposed to join us very soon. Mr. Adi Godrej, Mr. Shamul Gupta, Excellencies, Ministers, Governors, MPs from Africa, Excellencies, Ambassadors representing the African countries in India, senior dignitaries, officials and industry leaders from African nations, senior officials and industry leaders from India, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Confederation of Indian Industry, it is indeed a great privilege to welcome you all to this special opening plenary session of the 9th CII-EXIM Bank India-Africa Project Partnership Conclave. A very special welcome to Your Excellencies who's seated on the dais. This partnership is extremely valuable for India, and we at CII proudly cherish this as one of our most important partnership networking that we do annually in Delhi. A special word of welcome to our own Minister, Sri Anand Sharma, who has graced this occasion every year since the last many years, and he holds this relationship, we know, very specially for him, and this has given us tremendous encouragement in taking this work forward in terms of India-Africa relationship. It's also a real honor that over 100 ministers, governors, and members of parliament have traveled to India for this event. CII is indeed immensely grateful for your interest in strengthening the partnership with Indian industry and deeply encouraged by your presence in New Delhi today. We are especially delighted that so many of our friends from African nations are attending the conclave, making this the biggest ever conclave that we have ever had. A warm welcome to the industry delegates, the media personnel from Africa. We wish you a very positive and a very productive and enjoyable stay in India. The participation of a large number of dignitaries is testimony to the mindscape occupied by this event. Since the inception of this event in 2005, the India-Africa Project Partnership Conclaves have helped shape a new economic confluence between our two sides, guided and led by Indian and African governments. Today, we enjoy a robust economic cooperation that embraces multiple spheres and walks of life. So far, CII has organized 8 such events in partnership with the EXIM Bank of India. Additionally, CII has also held 13 regional conclaves across the African continent to focus on specific projects. CII's engagement with Africa is long and extends to all geographies and economic sectors. We are particularly pleased to partner on diverse government-to-government programs on issues such as innovation, skill development, and capacity building. The idea is to build information exchange systems for better understanding and collaborations between industry sectors of both sides. CII translates key opportunities into concrete grassroots projects aligning with the government objectives as laid out under the India-Africa Forum Summit process. Trade, investment, development, and people-to-people links are at heart of our work with Africa. The outcome of such partnership building is evident in the project partnership conclaves, which in the last editions have put forward over 1,500 projects. This is indeed a great achievement, and we are proud about it. Over the next 2 days, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, we look forward to seeing a very heavy agenda ahead of all of us, including plenary sessions, parallel sessions that would take forward the discussions and elicit new ideas, new projects, and above all, new partnerships. We look forward to the deliberations and insight from our eminent panelists and speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, may I once again welcome you very warmly to this 9th Conclave of India-Africa Partnership. Thank you very much.
And now to give his address, may I invite Mr. Adi Godrej, President CII, to give his address.
His Excellency Dr. Guy Scott, Vice President, Republic of Zambia, His Excellency Mr. Philemon Young, Prime Minister, Republic of Cameroon, Honorable Shri Anand Sharma, Minister of Commerce, Industry and Textiles, India, distinguished leaders on the dais, Mr. Shyamal Gupta, Chairman CII Africa Committee, Mr. Chandrajit Banerjee, Director General CII, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. South-South cooperation is not just a theoretical construct anymore. It's a major reality, a reality that is visibly altering the global trade and investment flows to the advantage of developing and emerging economies such as our own. Today, at this special session, we have the gracious presence of His Excellency Dr. Guy Scott, Vice President, Republic of Zambia, His Excellency Mr. Philemon Young, Prime Minister, Republic of Cameroon, and Honorable Minister Mr. Anand Sharma, Minister for Commerce, Industry and Textiles, Government of India, who have played pioneering roles in fostering a common understanding among the South countries and in strengthening South-South economic cooperation. Ladies and gentlemen, we could not have asked for a greater beginning to this conclave. South-South cooperation has come a long way since the adoption of the 1978 Buenos Aires Plan of Action for Promoting and Implementing Technical Cooperation among Developing Countries. The South leaders had then clearly recognized the innate strengths of the diverse developing economies and the opportunity to work in unison towards realizing the common goal of economic growth. Industrial development and poverty reduction. But the big challenge was how to bring about a realignment of the global trade and investment patterns and flows that were predominantly controlled by the industrialized North countries. The 1990s presented the first big opportunity for the South countries to step up their cooperation endeavor. A new wave of economic liberalization swept across the developing economies, unlocking the latent entrepreneurial potentials of our societies. In less than a decade, many of the South economies entered a new phase of rapid economic growth, even as our industry's global competitiveness grew exponentially. Today, the South countries rest on strong fundamentals and have proven leadership in technology advancement, innovation, and sustainable practices, paving the way for even greater South-South cooperation. South-South trade flows have picked up great momentum over these years. Many emerging economies are already diversifying their exports towards other emerging economies in order to increase their exports. However, we need to ensure that all developing countries and especially the least developed countries are doing the same. For this, our governments would have to support the private sector in venturing out into the developing markets. Currently, South-South trade is largely determined by trade flows between the major South economies like India, China, Brazil, Mexico. Moreover, this trade itself is not adequately diversified. So in promoting South-South trade, let us also consider key steps to boost trade flows between a greater number of South economies as well as broaden the South trade basket. Sustainable growth of South-South trade will also require investments in new capabilities, trade facilitation measures, infrastructure, and trade finance. Investment and trade among developing countries should set a good example of how to create win-win solutions. But we must take it to the next level by discussing how policies, institutional conditions, and the right kinds of environments can further promote successful South-South cooperation. Specifically, as incomes and demand for food have grown, agriculture has begun attracting substantial larger investment flows. But the benefits to smallholders and others in some of the poorest recipient countries in the region remain uncertain. It is imperative that these investments are geared to serve local needs better and to strengthen production capacity. Sustainable development is another key area that mandates the attention of all South countries, even as the world stares at big issues like climate change and food and energy insecurities. The experience and successes that many countries of the global South have achieved in environment-related areas can provide valuable impetus, ideas, and means for other countries in the South to address similar concerns and challenges. Technology transfer among developing countries and capacity building in environmentally sound use of technologies and sustainable management of natural resources are key for the development of the South and the world at large. Biodiversity is another key economic, financial, cultural, and strategic asset for developing countries and is critical for economic and social development as well as poverty reduction. The loss of biodiversity undermines the possibilities for sustained growth of developing countries. The majority of the world's biodiversity resides in the global South. It is obvious that developing countries are facing the serious challenge of sustainable development. Hence, this area too assumes key significance in the context of South-South cooperation. Much as we would want South-South cooperation to play a defining role in global economic affairs, the underlying notion of this rapidly emerging framework is that South-South cooperation is not a substitute, but rather than a complement to North-South cooperation. South-South cooperation should be guided by the following principles: mutual benefit, respect for national sovereignty, national ownership and independence, equality, as well as non-conditionality and non-interference in domestic affairs. I'm pleased to say that this annual conclave has served as an important platform for the South leadership to identify the potential areas of South-South cooperation and to take this cooperation endeavor to the next level. I'm extremely hopeful that the intense deliberations that will take place over the next 2 days will open several new vistas for South-South cooperation. I welcome all of you to this conclave and wish each one of you great success in your engagements here. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
It now gives me great pleasure to invite our first guest speaker for this evening, His Excellency Mr. Philemon Young, Prime Minister, Republic of Cameroon. Your Excellency, please.
Good evening. I have heard of India thousands of times. Now I have seen India for the first time. Some philosophers say that it's better to see once rather than hear 1,000 times. Very happy to be here. Your Excellencies, heads of delegations, His Excellency the Minister of Commerce, Industry and Textiles, Government of India, Your Excellencies, the President of EXIM Bank India, the Chairman of the Confederation of Indian Industry, ladies and gentlemen, I am honored to speak at this opening ceremony. This is an indication that the government of India has a strong desire to support development efforts in Cameroon and strengthen cooperation between our two countries. I would like to convey to the government of India and the people of India the warm gratitude of His Excellency Paul Biya, President of Cameroon. Our thanks also go to the Indian government for its support to the rice, maize, and cassava projects in Cameroon. Tractors of Indian origin are now working on farms in the east of Cameroon and on rice farms in different parts of Cameroon. We are not forgetting the commitment of the Indian government to the distance, medicine, and education projects in my country. In fact, these projects are already in the operational phase. President Paul Biya last week announced the opening of Cameroon's diplomatic mission in New Delhi. This is a clear demonstration of our president to facilitate exchanges between our two countries. As you know, economics and diplomacy go together. Despite a particularly difficult global economic and financial context, India has spared no effort to actively work for the reduction of poverty in Africa, and particularly in Cameroon. Ladies and gentlemen, Cameroon has chosen to place public sector and private sector partnerships at the center of its development policies. A good example of public-private partnerships is the 1,000-kilometer Chad-Cameroon pipeline, which carries crude oil from Chad to the offshore terminal of Kribi in the south region of Cameroon. This is one of the largest infrastructure investments so far in sub-Saharan Africa. We have also developed viable partnerships in other sectors. 3 hydroelectric dams are being constructed in Lompanga, Mekin, and Mainville with various partners from Europe and North America. In a week's time, a 216-megawatt gas-fired plant will start to produce electricity in the city of Kribi. Work has been completed on the Dibamba heavy fuel plant in Douala for the production of hydroelectricity. Production of natural gas in Lokbaba in the city of Douala for the generation of electricity has already started. Industries in Douala will therefore have another source of clean energy. We are committed to developing strong public-private partnerships to finance investments, increase efficiency, and enhance our technical capacity in building infrastructure. Our priority as a country is to upgrade national seaports, airports, railways, and road infrastructure to ensure greater mobility of people, goods, and ideas. We are constructing a deep sea port in the city of Kribi with separate terminals for aluminum, hydrocarbons, iron ore, nickel, cobalt, and other minerals. There is the ongoing building of 2 cement factories in Douala by the Nigerian-based company Dangote and a Moroccan company called Simaf. 2 other cement factories are being constructed in the city of Limbe by Korean companies called Avco and the other one G Power Cement. A deep sea port is also envisaged in the city of Limbe as well as a modern shipyard. The construction of a new highway linking the cities of Yaoundé and Douala, in part financed by the Chinese government, is underway. The construction of a second bridge over the Vuri River, financed by the French Development Agency, will start soon. We are presently an exporter of agricultural produce. We intend to become an even greater exporter in the future. We call upon Indian companies to join Cameroonians in this attractive agricultural sector. In order to improve our agricultural productivity, we have launched investment projects in seed production, animal production, and fisheries. Our National Hydrocarbons Corporation has signed a memorandum of understanding with the German company Ferrostal to set up a fertilizer factory in Cameroon. Ladies and gentlemen, some people call my country Africa in miniature, the triangle in the center of Africa. We are proud to say that we are many things all at the same time. Bravo. Arguably, Cameroon is one of Africa's best destinations for investments, such as investments coming from India. Needless to say that it is also the best tourist destination in the region. We harbor immense natural resources such as petroleum, natural gas, bauxite, iron ore, diamond, gold, nickel, cobalt, among others. We have the potential to build a productive domestic mining industry. Welcome to our mining business. The government of Cameroon in November 2012 signed a mining convention with Cam Iron for the development of the Mbalam iron ore project. Cam Iron is the local subsidiary of the Australian company Sundance Limited, backed by a Chinese company called Hanlong. Negotiations for the Mini Matap Ngaundal bauxite project are also ongoing with a company called Cameroon Alumina Limited, whose board comprises the Dubai Aluminium from Dubai, as well as Hindalco Industries Limited, an Indian-based company. 2 weeks ago in this same hotel, a delegation from my country led by the Secretary General of my office, Minister Motaze, was here to pursue negotiations for that bauxite project with our partners of Hindalco. Welcome to Cameroon, Hindalco. In order to attract more investors to Cameroon, we have put in place suitable incentives such as an attractive and competitive mining code, a development of a policy to phase infrastructure needed for the exploration, exploitation, and processing of mineral substances. Concerning the petroleum sector, our National Hydrocarbons Corporation, in partnership with foreign oil industries, is carrying out vast oil exploration programs. It is estimated that we have 695 billion cubic meters of natural gas. However, for the moment, we are exploiting only 1.8 billion of that amount of natural gas. Work on the modernization of our oil refinery in Limbe is going on. There are plans with Gaz de France for the construction of a natural gas liquefaction plant in Kribi. Also, the government of Cameroon has signed a memorandum of understanding with Sevtec India Private Limited for the construction of a bitumen factory in my country. We are presently discussing with the Indian company called Jindal Steel and Power Limited for the development of various projects in the mining sector. Welcome, Jindal Limited. Suitable legislation has also been enacted to attract investments in the petroleum sector. This legislation includes a gas code, a petroleum code, which provides for contractual incentives, economic and financial measures. Cameroon possesses vast forests, which are sources of timber and other forest products. We have some of the best hardwoods in the world. Our tropical rich forests also create climatic conditions that favor the production of diversified agricultural products such as cocoa, coffee, tea, cotton, banana, rubber, palm oil, and a host of other tropical fruits. Our government has enacted appropriate laws which enhance investment incentives, provide for free enterprise, reduce tariff barriers, and facilitate trade and capital flows. These regulations concern an investment code and an industrial zone, free zone, which grant fiscal incentives, one-stop shops, regulatory institutions which are jointly managed by the public and private sectors, partnership contracts based on the formula of build, operate, and transfer, the so-called BOTs, a liberal labor code which regulates employment and facilitates productivity. We have also created national agencies to facilitate partnerships, such as the Investment Promotion Agency, and a council to follow up economic partnership agreements, and the National Agency for Standards and Quality. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we are aware of India's worldwide leadership in the domains of human resource development and the information technologies. We have put together two major projects in these areas. During our stay here in New Delhi, we will also sign 3 memoranda of understanding in the domains of agriculture, concerning agri-incubators, and social welfare concerning prostheses for the disabled or handicapped persons. Investment opportunities abound in Cameroon, ready to be tapped. These will be brought to fruition through cooperation, like cooperation between Cameroon and India. You are all invited to Cameroon's special session at the Mumtaz Hall at 3 p.m. tomorrow. I hope to welcome all of you to Cameroon soon for business deals. Long live India-Cameroon cooperation. Long live international cooperation. Thank you for your kind attention.
I'd now like to invite His Excellency Dr. Guy Scott, Vice President, Republic of Zambia, to give his address. Dr. Scott.
You're going to give us some light, are you, or can I see well enough? I think I can probably see well enough. Thank you. Your Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, Ministers, Ambassadors, President and Chairman of the Executive Director of the members of the Confederation of Indian Industry, representatives of EXIM Bank, representatives of international organizations, representatives of business and industry, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to start by thanking the Confederation of Indian Industry and EXIM Bank for bringing us together this week for the 9th India-Africa Conclave, and for inviting me to speak at this, your particular special opening session. As this is the opening session, I'm going to talk about India-African business relations in general. There was actually no guidance on this, but I take it that this is a thematic speech. And I'm not going to talk about Zambia in particular. However, being the Vice President of a progressive government, a government that is known to represent much that is new, innovative and exciting for investors in Africa, I'm sure you will also want to come and hear more specifically about Zambia in our special session tomorrow afternoon. For many years, both the public and private sectors in many of our countries have been focused predominantly on the developed economies of the North, whether for our trade or innovation or for the education of our children or our preferred destinations for travel. First preference has often been towards Europe and the USA. Regional business has certainly expanded, but the influence of the North has tended to remain paramount. I might just add here that our people, our ordinary people, as usual, are way ahead of us. They've been migrating and trading and smuggling and doing all sorts of things south. It is only us, the leaders, who are still talking about it. These days, though, even this is finally changing, as decision makers in the rich but fundamentally faulty economies of the North struggle to come to terms with their own need for structural adjustment, some sort of poetic justice there, I think. The economies of the South have been substantially less damaged. At the same time, and long overdue, when we look for expanding our trade and economic links, we are thinking more broadly and realizing the scale of the potential for expanding our South-South partnerships. In the past, a key constraint to expanding South-South relations have been the long-established stereotypes that have tended to dominate our thinking about each other. And no doubt this has put some of you off doing business in Africa, and some of us from looking for investment from India. Expectations of Africa have for many people dwelt on some unpleasant combination of corruption, aggression, lawlessness, and constantly shifting goalposts. And perhaps some particular subset of stereotypes of Africans may be lurking in some of your minds as you look at me standing here. I was interviewed by the BBC as soon as I became Vice President, and all they could think of to say is, white farmer becomes Vice President of African country. And the interviewer, who was an Irishman, I said, what, you mean incoherent, garrulous terrorist interviews Vice President of African country? I can assure you that I'm not a farmer, and as a politician, I certainly don't represent what might be called white business interests. Rather, in common with a growing number of countries on the continent, the Zambian government and myself as Vice President are champions of good governance, actively pro-poor economic policy, job creation, democracy, and public service. Some of you may still be skeptical about change in Africa. I say so as I note from the program that one of tomorrow's sessions is called Investment Opportunities in the New Uganda Post-Idi Amin. I do understand that investors are often rather cautious, but to put this in context, I'm sure you would agree that it is a long time since serious people met to discuss the new India post Mrs. Indira Gandhi's state of emergency. Let us by all means remember our history, but not live in the past. At present, Africa features the highest average returns on foreign investment of any destination in the world. However, Kofi Annan's statement that Africa's profitability is one of the best-kept secrets in today's world economy remains true, some 15 years after he first highlighted this point. And it's good news. A recent analysis has confirmed this, incidentally. A very detailed statistical study has confirmed that African rates of return to foreign investment are the highest in the world. And this is both good news and bad news. It's bad news because it points up that people are not prepared to make longer-term, lower return investments. Still, they are living in the short-term future. And I think this is one of the fundamental things we have to change. I have a friend who builds hotels. He says in London, he was offered a 60-year mortgage at a rate of something like 5% to build a hotel. In Zambia, they wouldn't let him into the bank unless he swore he was asking for money for less than 5 years. And this, of course, makes all the difference in the world to whether a country is viable economically or not. Investment in Africa is often short-term, with little exposure of much capital over significant periods of time. The propensity to trade rather than manufacture or grow things is a clear example. In this country, though, in India, the economic transformation of the past 20 years or so represents a shift from an economy dominated by a massive diversity of small businesses to one in which the balance between smaller and larger businesses has shifted to create more space for the larger and, more importantly, the longer-term investments. The strength of an economy that combines small business, especially family business, with larger business, long-term investments and innovation is evident. You have that here in India. In Africa, we need to do the same. We need to catch up with you. And we believe with partnership with Indian investors is a prime means of getting there. I recently read, in fact, I read it so recently, I was in the airplane yesterday when I read it. I recently read an article about the top 20 international destinations for Indian tourists. Some of your population, a good chunk of your population, has the money to go and see the world. But the 20 top destinations do not feature a single African country. They feature some south-south, Australia is south, but generally speaking, it's Austria, Ireland, United States of America. So we have a long way to go even in getting that simple bit of south-south commerce together. And this is despite our famed and highly enjoyable game parks, waterfalls, beaches, culture and music. So our tourist industry is another is a sleeping giant. Kenya notwithstanding. I mean, yes, you've all seen movies of documentaries of African wildlife. But it remains one of the wonders of the world, in fact, possibly the leading wonder of the world, and yet somehow it never quite comes to fruition. Perhaps, again, the estrangement, the feeling that you're in a foreign place, that perhaps you're in danger, tends to dominate that industry, and somehow we need to unlock it. And I'd be very happy to talk to any investor, large-scale investor with serious tendencies or serious intentions in this direction. So we do need to speak the same language, but we need to make sure that we understand what you are expecting and that you get what you are promised and that there are no nasty surprises. There's a cultural issue when people from outside Africa meet Africa. My mother swears the story is true of a young colonial officer fresh out of Cambridge making his way into the colonial service in the 1950s and going for a walk outside his post to see the bush, and the sun came down rather too suddenly as it comes down here, and he realized he was lost. So he shinned up a tree, a thorn tree, to hide from the marauding lions and so forth that he thought were on the ground, and spent an extremely unpleasant night, unable to sleep and unable to save himself from injury. And just as the sun rose above the horizon, there was a knocking sound. And it was his servant who had observed him climbing up the tree, had decided that's where he wanted to be for the night, and was bringing him his tea. So the story, of course, may well have started here in India, in colonial India, but I know it only as a Northern Rhodesian or Zambian story. So you have to get used to each other and to the way in which other people live and get some understanding. So as Indian investors, I believe that you have a particular resource in the form of the Indian diasporas in Africa. We all have them. South Africa has a very large population of Indian origin. It even sent some Indians back to liberate you. Kenya and Uganda, of course, have large populations, or had large populations due to the building of the railway. In Zambia's case and Malawi's case, it was a deliberate move by the colonial government to introduce commerce, trading, and trading, especially making up small quantities into big quantities of crops like maize. And we have Indian cultures, or they may be a bit out of date, a little bit behind the times, but I don't think they're stuck in a time warp. I think they're ready to move forward if the world around them changes. And so these long-established communities offer an important means for engaging in our continent. Lastly, I would like to say that we are now making up for lost time. Increasing the business links between India and Africa is an obvious and important priority for all. We can offer opportunity and resources that you don't have here, whether in agriculture, tourism, mining, or other natural resource-based activities, manufacturing, or anything else. Investment in Africa will therefore help you and help your economies and your people. For ourselves, we want to create jobs and expand our economies. To do this, we want to add value. And we want to add value to people who understand us. And talking to Indian mining investors, they point out that in this country, 10 or 20 years ago, you wouldn't do a homegrown large mining operation. You'd have to have foreign interests in it, foreign technologies, foreign capital. But now India is standing on her own feet as far as these large high-tech operations involved. And we want to follow you. We don't want to be a subsidiary to India any more than we want to be a subsidiary to Britain or to the United States. But I believe we've got common ground there. And I can only end by quoting my daughter, who would say, if she was here, "Dad, it's a no-brainer." Once again, thank you for your time.
And I now have the pleasure to invite the Honorable Minister for Commerce, Industry and Textile, Government of India, Mr. Anand Sharma, to give his keynote address. Mr. Anand Sharma.
Your Excellencies, the Vice President of the Republic of Zambia, Dr. Guy Scott, the Prime Minister of Cameroon, Mr. Philemon Yang, Vice President of Uganda, Kimanuka Sazikandi, the Vice President of Liberia, Mr. Bokai, the Vice President of Burundi, Mr. Rufi Kiri, the Prime Minister of Cote d'Ivoire, Mr. Daniel Duncan, the Prime Minister of Guinea-Bissau, Mr. Rui Duarte Boros, the President of the CII, Mr. Adi Godrej, Mr. Shamal Gupta, Mr. Chandrajit Banerjee, Excellencies, the Ministers, High Commissioners, Ambassadors, our guests from Africa, representing 45 countries, captains of industry, ladies and gentlemen. It's truly a privilege for me to welcome you all to this 9th CII-EXIM Bank Conclave. I welcome you on behalf of the government and the people of the Republic of India, a developing country, an emerging economy, and the largest democracy on this planet. As I welcome you, in a spirit of partnership between our two great regions, a partnership that has potential and promise for the 21st century, a partnership that is also deeply rooted in a history of trust and friendship, in a history of shared experiences, of colonization, of deprivation, of exploitation, of denials, a history of our joint struggles, a history which has united us to understand the world as it has evolved better. I was hearing very carefully, and I would like to say that as we address the present, the leaders, statesmen, and visionaries do not divorce themselves from the past. We don't live in the past, but we cannot be but connected with the past and the history, because there are lessons which we have learned, our forebears have learned, our leaders have learned, who fought for our freedom and who gave us our freedom and the right to make our own choices, the right to determine our own destiny. And it is therefore important that as we address the opportunities, challenges of the present, we also clearly recognize that what is there which brings Africa and India closer to each other is not that India and Africa are introducing one to another. I agree with what Dr. Guy Scott had said, that people have been traversing for centuries. That was there when you didn't have modern jets, modern ship liners. You didn't have IT or Twitter or Facebook. The powerful new tools of information technology and communication. We had entrepreneurship. We had people who were inquisitive, who were daring, who were sailing for commerce, exchange of ideas, exchange of cultures, enriching each other in the process and learning about each other. Today's world provides us much more opportunities, particularly to the younger generation. And that's why it is important to understand that we are engaged in a different manner today than what we were a few decades ago. Those were the decades, defining ones though, soon after the Second World War. It was the independence of India in one of the most powerful and biggest mass movement, but peaceful and non-violent, led by the Indian National Congress, Mahatma Gandhi and Nehru and others, who brought down the mightiest empire of that time, which triggered the decolonization in Africa and South Americas. It was India's independence, and at that time, it was Gandhi who was alive, the father of our nation. But when it comes to who went to Africa, it is Gandhi, who spent 23 years there, braving the oppression, the violence, what was unleashed, to identify himself. It was in Africa that Gandhi fine-tuned his tools of struggle. It was Africa who gave us Gandhi, who came back and led India. And it is one name that resonates in the 21st century, not only in Africa and India, but in every capital of the world, because it was Gandhi's influence which powered the civil rights movement in Africa. It was Gandhi's movement which moved powerful leaders like Martin Luther King. And there are many others. So when we are talking of a globalized world, our leaders, our thinkers have not looked at the world from a narrow prison in a truncated manner. It's our philosophy that we have in our embrace always taken all cultures, all religions, all civilizations. And I'm very proud to say as an Indian that even today, India stands as a shining example. We are a melting pot of history. We are home to every religion and every faith. We are home to people. We have, for centuries, accepted people who were discriminated, who were persecuted. And that history is very well documented. That's why, as a political activist and leader, I have always connected my mind as I deal with the present-day issues, challenges, policies, initiatives, as to what our rich past has been. But in the 21st century, the manner in which we are engaged, it's important for me to underscore to this one of the largest gathering at the CII-EXIM Bank Conclave on Africa. We have over 900 delegates, as Adi Godrej was telling me. Their delegates spilled over to other halls, watching us speak, and later I'm sure the enthralling cultural performances to follow. It's correct that it is the inaugural session, and there would be dedicated focus sessions to follow. But today, Africa and India are building a partnership in a world which is fast changing and redefining itself. In a world where the axis of development has shifted from north and west to south and east. In a world where we are witness to a rebalancing of the global economy, which should happen. Because for decades and decades, in the second half of the 20th century, our countries didn't have the resources or the institutions to address the baggage of history and the past. And that is when we were not free people. So we were investing whatever we had in building institutions, in capacity building, in human resources. And that's exactly what India did. That was after its independence. We built our institutions. We built our heavy industries. It is true that in the first few decades we did reach out and shook hands with some friends when it came to building technological capacities. And there was nothing wrong. But that was long back. As we were doing that, we were building minds, investing in human resources who have powered India to what India is today. This is not on borrowed mind or borrowed institutions. What we have been able to do, we have been able to do entirely on our own in the last few decades. But at the same time, you live in a world which is globalized, which is interconnected, which is interdependent. And it won't be Words of wisdom, if any country in this world were to say that I can exist on my own without needing any other country. That's why the world is itself today talking of global assembly lines, global manufacturing lines. We have to recognize the potential as well as the challenges of an interconnected and interdependent world. But when these institutions were being built, that was the time when Africa, nation after nation, was emerging, looking at a destiny which rightfully belonged to the people of Africa. It was at that time that India started connecting as a free nation again. That was a commitment that was made at the time of India's independence by none other than Mahatma Gandhi, that the independence of India and the freedom of India shall be incomplete as long as Africa remains in bondage. Unquote. These are Gandhi's words of 1946. And India's first Prime Minister, who was a global statesman, Jawaharlal Nehru, who enjoyed the finest of relationship and comradeship with the leaders of Africa, who were leading the liberation struggles and the freedom struggle, from Nyerere to Kenyatta to Konda, and it's a long list of those African stalwarts. And these were the leaders who worked together in putting together a South-South cooperation platform then. It is not something which we are learning. We are ensuring that we actively consolidate the vision of those leaders by our actions today. And I would like to share here that it was at that time our country, which had less literate people and more illiterates, less rich people, which even today they will be in a minority in any country, but more today. We had few, not that few, of our young people who were able to go to the institutions of excellence when we were building the Indian Institutes of Technology, Management, Science, Space Science, Neurosciences. These were all built in 60s, early 60s, not later. That India decided to share its resources and development experience with Africa. It was at that time that we started the scholarship program, the ITEC scholarship, the ICCR scholarship. And my brothers and sisters from Africa would recall many of the seniors, many of my generation, that tens of thousands of students from Africa came in 60s, in 70s, in 80s, in 90s, to be there in the Indian professional institutions, to be trained as teachers, doctors, professors. Many African leaders who even went to our military academies. Many went back to become prime ministers and presidents of their countries, professors and scientists. This is a partnership which has been assiduously built. This is not a partnership which can be compared with India's engagement with any other region or Africa's engagement with any other country. I can say with all confidence and pride, India's engagement with Africa is distinct and different. And partnership means we look at each other's strengths, what we can offer to each other, what we can learn from each other. Partnership is always a two-way process. We know our country has challenges, despite the heights that we have been able to achieve, particularly in bridging the digital divide, technology divide. We still have to continue to grow and reinvest the resources which we generate so that the fruits of development reach tens of millions or hundreds of millions of Indians who still need social and economic empowerment. But at the same time, with Africa, we have institutionalized not a dialogue, but created a platform. Through the India-Africa Forum Summit, beginning in 2008, April in New Delhi, and at the summit in Addis Ababa in 2011. The two summits have provided a roadmap, identified the priority sectors, ranging from infrastructure, capacity building, agriculture, health, energy, education, and beyond. We are building 70 institutions in Africa together. My Prime Minister at Addis had announced at the second summit, like in the first summit, a development assistance of $5 billion, $5.2 billion was announced at the Addis summit. We have doubled the number of the scholarships. Today we have more than 50,000 students from Africa and India, but 15,000 would be on the scholarships. And in the next 3 years, there'll be 22,000 more students from the great continent of Africa who will be here on India scholarship programs. We have built institutions of excellence. The Kofi Annan Center of Excellence in Ghana, the Entrepreneurship Center in Senegal, which I had the privilege to go there to Dakar to inaugurate when I was a minister in Foreign Affairs. And the list is a long one. We are committed to establish an India Institute of Foreign Trade in Uganda, in Kampala. India-Africa Institute of Information Technology in Ghana, one on education in Burundi, one on agriculture, one on diamond in Botswana. These are the things which we are doing. But how we are doing differently, these are determined, like the participation in the summit, by Africa Union, the leadership of Africa. Right from the first summit, we were guided by the leaders of Africa and continue to be so. We do not propose countries and projects, though we do enough bilaterally with every region in Africa. But when it comes to the Pan-African institutions and initiatives, it is the leadership of Africa. I know that there have been delays, and I wish good luck to my friends in the AU Commission to give us the final identification of some of the other major programs, particularly the chairperson of the AU Commission and a very good friend of mine, Dr. Kosa Zanazuma. But I can assure you that we will continue to work in the same spirit. When it comes to building partnership and sharing, one of the most significant of initiatives that India took, beginning with the visit of the then President of India, who was a great scientist himself, Dr. Abul Kalam, in 2004, that is the Pan-African E-Network project. When he announced that India will share its technology, its satellites, to bridge the digital divide in sub-Saharan Africa. That project has linked 47 countries in sub-Saharan Africa. It has linked universities of Africa with major universities of India, hospitals in Africa with super specialty hospitals in India. This Pan-African network is not a commercial project. It is entirely the gift of the government and people of the Republic of India. This is the difference of engagements being empowering or the engagements being exploitative. Africa is a rich continent, rich in resources, both human and mineral. Our two regions account for 2.2 billion people in a world which is fast changing. Our combined GDP is $3 trillion. I'm always a bit disappointed when I have to refer to India being still at 1.85 because of the economic crisis that held us back in the last few years. I wouldn't be standing here and talking of this number. It would have been a different number. But again, as I said, the opportunities which travel very fast in a world connected by information technology, so do the challenges as we experienced during the financial and the economic crisis. We spread so fast that it impacted every region of the world, every country, and tested the leadership, whether in Africa or in Americas or Europe or in India and Asia. That's the difference that it made. But still what we have together is our enormous strengths. A couple of weeks ago, I think 2 issues back, The Economist had a cover story on Africa. And I read it with much interest. That's a region of dynamic growth. Many countries are growing at 7% plus. When we look at the income in Africa, the average incomes have grown by 30% in 1 decade. And the potential to grow much more. Similarly, the GDP and even the projected GDP growth informs us of the potential and the strength. Africa has a great future. But it's true, and we fully agree, that what is required with economic growth and sharing is to ensure that our people are enabled and empowered to benefit from their development, for growth to be inclusive. And that's why what I was referring to. Indian corporates, Indian public sector have followed the correct ethics, and I hope they will always follow, and they must follow. Yes, there was a time when there was less value addition in India, and manufacturing was not of that high level. Things continue to change. They don't remain frozen. In Africa also that's changing. Many of the Indian investors are doing value addition. When you look at mining sector, there's value addition. More has to be done so that jobs are created and wealth is generated. I entirely agree with that. And that is what we encourage and support. Today, our companies are present there in diverse sector, whether exploration of oil and gas, where Africa has resources in abundance, or in mining, agriculture and health, or infrastructure building, whether the sugar projects from Ethiopia to Tanzania, or the agriculture projects, as the Prime Minister of Cameroon was mentioning, large number of countries. Long back, the irrigation pumps from India for agriculture projects, different regions. More recent in my memory was the rice project in Senegal, but right from West Africa to North Africa to East Africa. But when I went to Egypt a few years ago, incidentally the President of Egypt will be here day after. And when I went there and I was talking about these powerful pumps which have lifted even rivers, and Mr. Sanjay Kirloskar is sitting here. It's his company and his grandfathers and fathers. So they refer to this irrigation pump as Kirloskar. They don't refer to it as pump. It has come to be defined as Kirloskar. Similarly about the tractors, which are there. On health project, I would like to mention, which I have done in the past, but it is very important when you look at the present narrative in the world, on health security, which is important, with new diseases coming to the fore. When we are talking of challenges, these are not economic or political challenges which countries face. We also have energy security, food security, pandemics. And these are the challenges which require partnerships, global partnerships. There is no country, no group of countries, however rich, technologically advanced, who can address these challenges on their own. That's why a global partnership to address these challenges. But in case of health, It was the arrival of the Indian generics which changed the global discourse. That was a battle fought, an ethical one, on the soil of Africa, way back in 1995-96. And the present chair of the AU Commission, Nkosazana Zuma, was the health minister under Madiba Dr. Mandela. At that time, the cost of treatment of HIV/AIDS for antiretrovirals for one patient per year was $13,000, which was brought down to $1,100, and now less than $1 a day, or 30-40 cents a day. Last year, India made a breakthrough after years and years of public-funded research to address the challenge of drug-resistant malaria. That vaccine is available now in Africa. First, it was tried in India. These are the things which are happening. And I will assure you that we will continue to work with you to ensure that life-saving medicines at affordable prices are made available to people in the entire developing world, and in particular in Africa, even as the new range of medicines come. And they are coming to treat cancer, to treat the tuberculosis, malaria, or HIV. Indian pharmaceutical industry, which is one of the biggest in the world. We produce more than 1/5 of the pharmaceuticals of the world. We are the global leader in generics. Now, why I'm saying that? Because there has been of late a move. A couple of years ago, we started hearing of moves outside the multilateral systems, questioning the efficacy or authenticity of our medicines, which occupy more than 1/5 of the global share. The reasons did not require rocket science to understand. Because we had broken the back of the multinational cartels which had made life-saving medicines prohibitive in their cost to the people in my country and other developing countries. And we explained. But interestingly, in our interaction with my fellow ministers, leaders from all over the world, including developed countries, I had to underscore one fact, that in the United States of America, after the American companies, the second largest number of FDA approvals are for Indian pharmaceutical companies. Last year, through a judicious process, India for the first time invoked what is a flexibility under a WTO protocol and agreement, TRIPS agreement of compulsory licensing. More than 200 times it has been invoked, never by India in the past. The first compulsory licensing, not only in pharmaceuticals but embracing a range of sectors, was done in 2001, when more than 101 were given in the United States of America itself, and then by other developed countries. But when it came to Brazil giving one, or India giving one, or Thailand giving one, or an African country looking at one, not arbitrarily, but through a well-defined judicial process, it didn't happen. That was for an anti-cancer drug, where the cost of treatment in our currency was 2,88,000 rupees for one cancer patient for 1 month. Our generics brought it down to 8,800, 8,800. So I got telephone calls, letters, what have you done? And I must share this with you. And one from my friend, and I have great respect for him, for the then USTR, Ambassador Ron Kirk. So I called my people, I said, this is what has been said. And what, interestingly, I was told that the Federal Drug Authority had invoked a compulsory license and placed the order on one of the Indian companies, that's Sun Pharma, to make the generic version of an anti-cancer drug. The generic version is Lipidox. that is to treat breast cancer. That was last February, within 2 weeks of what this debate was all about. This March, on the 4th of March, a permanent order has been placed on Indian pharmaceutical companies for anti-cancer drugs by the Federal Drug Authority in the United States of America. Because it's important for me to share with Excellencies, the heads of governments and ministers, because the target of this campaign, which I referred to earlier in 2008-9, was Africa and some of the developing countries. Now, on more important issues, as I referred to, about our technology collaboration, that is what we are committed to share. Indian technologies and developmental experiences are there to be shared. We are very happy that the big divide has been bridged, particularly in communication, in information technology, but in IT, where India has leapfrogged to be a global leader. We know we have to do more, but that's exactly what is being shared with all sincerity. Today, India is, despite being challenged by the global climate and downturn, one of the fastest growing economies, one of the first 3 favored destinations for foreign investors. But Indian companies are also stepping out, both public sector and private sector, to invest in other countries. It's not only in Europe, in Americas. We have for a long time, as Dr. Guy Scott was saying, that people were looking only at these regions or traveling only to these regions, but I can assure him that today a large number of Indian tourists travel to Africa. There are many present here who can raise their hands to tell you, who go to see the game safaris, who take their families. But when it comes to sharing of the technologies for Africa, these are available, affordable, and adaptable. In Africa, our companies have, by conservative estimates, in the last 11-12 years, invested $45 billion, if not more. The two-way trade has grown in 1 decade from 3 billion to 70 billion. Are we happy with this? The answer is no. These numbers must change, and that's why you are meeting here, our friends, to do hand-holding, to identify projects. We will be there to support in every possible manner with our institutional strengths. Besides the available existing lines of credit, which is known to you, we have created, through ECGC and EXIM Bank, my ministry, another credit line that is for the project credit, which is available for long-term projects on the most competitive of rates and terms. And these are for infrastructure projects available to governments, available to government-owned entities. And recently, we launched the pilot for the countries of SAARC region and Africa alone, where we have given further interest subvention, making it the most attractive, cost-effective, long-term project credit. Take the benefit of that. So with these words, I wish the conclave all the success and assure you once again of India's abiding commitment to continue to invest in building, nurturing, and consolidating this great partnership. Thank you.
And now to conclude this session, may I invite Mr. Shyamal Gupta, Chairman, CII Africa Committee, to give his remarks, please.
Good evening to all of you. I think after the brilliant, eloquent, informative speech by our Honorable Minister, hardly anything can be done that has not been covered. It's a brilliant speech, and thank you, Honorable Minister. Since the time is short, I will try to restrict myself in 2 minutes to propose various people who has come here and the people on the dais who have come here. Excellencies, ministers, governors, MPs from Africa, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to make the concluding remarks at this power-packed special opening plenary 9th CII-EXIM Bank Conclave on India-Africa Project Partnership. First, I want to thank His Excellency, Mr. Phimon Yang, Prime Minister of Cameroon, for sharing his vision about development of Cameroon in industry, agriculture, mining, minerals, oil and gas, and where they're opening the gate for Indian corporations, and already Indians are there. There's a great cooperation which is coming, and thank you very much for sharing your program in Cameroon. We'll discuss this in the special session on Cameroon. Then I want to thank His Excellency Dr. Guy Scott, Vice President of Zambia, for a very elaborate speech about the opening of the Zambian economy and about the history, how Indians were there, and his plan for trade, investment, and commerce, where India can certainly cooperate in a big way. These are great suggestions which we will take forward in the successive specialized forum which we will discuss. This will also going to help and in fact energize the global trade and investment once these programs are implemented properly. Your Excellencies, it is a very great pleasure to listening to you. Now once again, I will come to our Honorable Minister, Sri Anand Sharma. He has covered everything so eloquently. Actually, I have no words to say, really. It is really great speech. Sir, thank you very much indeed. It's really inspiring. Now, as you all know, or some of you may not know, that our Commerce Minister, Mr. Anand Sharma, has taken a great personal interest towards developing that India-Africa relationship. And it is not in terms of trade, commerce, and industry, but as he said, on a relationship basis, more not for just trade and investment, but on a cooperative basis. That means India to partner Africa in its progress and development. And that's a great thing which he has brought up in his speech. And we should certainly look to hear from him more. But he has told so much things, he has given so much thing on the Africa-India relationship. One last thing I want to add, sir. At the last conclave, I think he touched upon this. At the last conclave, CII released its recommendation to enhance the participation of Indian companies in the infrastructure projects in Africa. A part of the recommendation has now been accepted, which is on introducing interest subvention under the buyer's credit scheme. Thank you very much, sir, for doing this, and I think Minister needs a proper applause for this. This has really helped Indian companies to be very competitive, and we'll move forward. I'd also like to thank Mr. Adi Godrej, President of the CII, for his inside views on South-South cooperation and the various issues which are likely to come up. And I think this is very important, and thank you very much for your address, Mr. Godrej. Now, I want to say a little bit of history. That CII-EXIM Bank of India together embarked on this India-Africa Conclave, a project partnership under the aegis of Ministry of External Affairs and Ministry of Commerce and Industry in 2005. As the chairman of the Africa Committee, I have been associated with this since its beginning, and I'm immensely proud and praised to say the participation, large participation from Africa. There are 45 African nations who are present in this session, and there are 900 Africans from Africa who are participating in this program. It really affirms the joint vision for development and participation from both sides, which is of high significance for bilateral cooperation by government and industry two together. I'm very happy about this growth and development. Minister did touch upon it, but it is 45 African countries and 900 people from Africa, and large number of business and ministers and presidents and prime ministers are here. I think that shows that things are happening in the right direction, which was started as a small beginning, has really taken shape. The stage is set, and I would be failing in my duty if I do not mention about the cooperation from the heads of mission of African countries with CII, and similarly the Indian missions in African countries. In all the CII meetings, CII Africa Committee meetings, the mission heads participated regularly and in an effective manner, and that has helped in really planning the program of this huge conference. I'd like to also take this opportunity to thank all the delegates who have traveled from Africa to participate here and wish you successful business deliberations and meetings. And let me once again welcome you to all the foreign participants from Africa to this conclave, and wish you a productive participation in the conclave. Thank you very much, and wish you all the best and all success. Thank you.